The notification came through at 11:47 on a Tuesday night. I remember the time because I'd been lying in bed checking my phone for no real reason. The way you do when you can't sleep but you're too tired to do anything useful. My husband was supposedly still at the office. A pitch deadline, he'd said, third one this month. The notification was from our home security app, motion detected, back hallway camera. I almost didn't look. I almost put the phone face down and closed my eyes and let whatever was happening in my own house happen without me knowing. Part of me thinks that version of my life, the one where I didn't tap that notification, still exists somewhere. Easier. Quieter. A lie I could have lived inside for a few more years. But I tapped it. The timestamp said 11:44 p.m. The footage was grainy, the way all these cameras are. That bluish night vision quality that makes everything look like it's underwater. But I could see the back door opening. I could see my husband stepping in. And I could see, right behind him, the woman I'd been close to since our first week of graduate school. She was laughing at something he'd said. Her hand was on his lower back. I watched it 3 times. Then I sat up in bed, set both feet on the floor, and just breathed. Her name is Sienna. We met during orientation for our master's program in public health at George Washington. She'd spilled an entire iced coffee on the orientation packet they'd given us, and she'd leaned over to me and whispered, "I'm choosing to believe that's a sign I'm supposed to drop out." I'd laughed so hard the faculty presenter had given us both a look. We were inseparable for 2 years. Study partners, apartment hunters, emergency contacts on each other's student health forms. When I started dating my husband, we'd met through a mutual colleague at a DC policy conference. Sienna was the first person I called. She helped me pick out what to wear on our 3rd date. She gave a toast at our wedding that made my mother cry. I trusted her the way you trust the people you grew up alongside, even when you didn't technically grow up together. That particular kind of trust that forms in your mid-20s, when everything feels new and terrifying and you find someone who helps you feel less alone in all of it. I thought she felt the same way. I didn't rush downstairs. I didn't throw open the bedroom door or turn on every light in the house. I pulled up the camera app again and switched to the living room feed. They were on the couch, his arm around her shoulder, her feet tucked up beneath her like she was comfortable, like she'd been there 100 times. Maybe she had. I watched for 40 seconds, long enough to know exactly what I was looking at, long enough for something in my chest to go very cold and very still. Then I opened the screen recorder on my phone and hit record, and I held the phone up to the live feed and recorded another 90 seconds of footage. I know that sounds calculated, it probably was, but I was also operating on a kind of autopilot that I think trauma triggers in certain people. You go practical because feeling is too big to fit inside the moment. I wasn't thinking about my marriage or my friendship or the last 4 years of my life. I was thinking evidence. Then I did something that, looking back, I'm still proud of, even though my hands were shaking so badly I could barely type. I forwarded the clip to my personal email. Then I airdropped it to my iPad. Then I uploaded it to a private Google Drive folder I created right there in bed at 11:52 p.m. with the name Do Not Delete, 3 copies. Then I lay back down. I didn't sleep, obviously. At some point around 1 a.m., I heard the back door again. The same soft click, and then footsteps on the stairs, and then my husband easing into the bedroom in the dark, trying not to wake me. I kept my breathing slow and even. He slid into bed. He was asleep in 8 minutes. I watched the ceiling until 5 a.m. The thing that kept circling in my mind wasn't even the betrayal yet. It was smaller than that. Specific. I kept thinking about 3 weeks ago, when Sienna and I had gone to brunch in DuPont Circle and she'd ordered 2 mimosas and told me she'd been going through something hard, something she couldn't really talk about yet, but that she was working through it. I'd reached across the table and squeezed her hand. I'd said, "I'm here whenever you're ready." She'd looked at me for a second with something in her eyes I hadn't been able to read. Now I could read it. I called in sick to work on Wednesday. That wasn't hard. I work remotely 3 days a week anyway, and my team is distributed across 3 time zones, so no one expected to see my face. I told my husband I had a migraine. He kissed my forehead before he left, the way he always does. The door hadn't even fully closed before I was sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop open, my phone, and a notepad. I spent 4 hours that day doing something I'd never imagined I would have to do, building a case. I requested our joint credit card statements going back 6 months. I went through them line by line. Restaurant charges on nights he'd said he was with clients. A hotel charge in Arlington, 40 minutes from our house. On a Friday, I'd been at a work conference in Philadelphia. Parking garage receipts in neighborhoods he had no reason to be in. I photographed everything. I sent it all to my personal email. I also called a family law attorney. I Googled divorce attorney DC and picked the third name on the list. I don't know why the third, just that the first two felt too aggressive, and the third had a photo that made her look like someone who would listen before she spoke. Her name was Adrian, and she answered her own phone, which I took as a good sign. I told her I needed a consultation. She asked if I was safe. I said yes. She said she had a cancellation Thursday at noon. I wrote it on the notepad and circled it twice. Thursday morning, I woke up early and made my husband's coffee the way I always do. 2 sugars, splash of oat milk, and handed it to him across the kitchen island and smiled when he said I seemed better. He left for work. I went upstairs, got dressed, and drove to Adrian's office on K Street. She was exactly what her photo had suggested. Calm, methodical. She let me talk for 15 minutes without interrupting. And when I finished, she pulled out a legal pad and said, "Okay, let's talk about what we need and what we have." I gave her the credit card statements. I showed her the video clip on my phone. She made notes. She explained what community property looks like in DC, which is an equitable distribution jurisdiction, meaning the court divides assets fairly, not necessarily 50-50, but taking everything into account. She told me about the house, which we'd bought 3 years ago, and the investment accounts, and what Discovery would look like if he decided to fight the divorce. She asked if I wanted to keep the house. I thought about it for longer than I expected. Then I said no. I didn't want to keep anything that had his fingerprints on it. She said that's a perfectly reasonable answer. I liked her. Here is where the story becomes something I could not have scripted. The migraine excuse had bought me Wednesday. For Thursday, I told my husband I had a dentist appointment, which he accepted without question, because he never tracked my schedule closely enough to question anything, which in retrospect tells you a great deal about our marriage. Friday, I took a personal day. I had a follow-up appointment, not with Adrian this time, but a different kind of appointment. One I'd scheduled 3 weeks before any of this happened. I'd found out I was pregnant 6 weeks before I found that camera notification. I'd taken the test on a Sunday morning in the bathroom while my husband was at the gym, and I'd sat on the edge of the tub for a long time looking at the result. We'd talked about kids in a vague, someday way. We weren't trying, but we weren't exactly not trying either. I hadn't told him yet. I'd been waiting for the right moment. After Wednesday, I knew there would never be a right moment with him. So I had made an appointment at a women's health clinic in Bethesda. I want to be careful here because this part of my experience is mine, and I don't know anyone in defense of it. What I will say is that I spent those 3 weeks between the positive test and the clinic appointment thinking very carefully about my life, about what I wanted it to look like, about what I was capable of, about who would be beside me. And then I spent the days after the camera footage thinking about those same questions with entirely different answers filling in the blanks. I knew what I was doing and why. I don't regret it. The clinic was on a quiet street in Bethesda, one of those medical office buildings with a fountain in the lobby that nobody ever looks at. I checked in, filled out the paperwork, and sat in the waiting room with a magazine I didn't read. When they called my name, a nurse led me back to a procedure room and told me the doctor would be in shortly. I changed into a gown. I stared at the ceiling tiles. There was a small succulent on the windowsill, which struck me as an oddly cheerful detail. The door opened. I knew the woman who walked in before she'd even looked up from my chart. I recognized her the same way you recognize someone out of context. The slight dissonance of seeing a familiar face somewhere unexpected. It took me 3 full seconds. And then it landed. She was my husband's younger sister. I had met her twice, once at a family dinner in Northern Virginia 2 years ago and once at a holiday party his parents had thrown. She was a doctor, OBGYN, but she lived and practiced on the Maryland side. I hadn't made the connection when I'd chosen this clinic because I hadn't been thinking about her at all. I'd just typed Women's Health Clinic Bethesda into Google Maps and picked the one with good reviews and weekend availability. She looked up from the chart. We stared at each other. Neither of us spoke for what felt like a full minute, but was probably 5 seconds. Her name was Lydia. She was 32 years old. She had her brother's eyes and her mother's composure, and an expression on her face right now that I could not fully read. She set the chart down on the counter. She said, very quietly, "Do you want me to get someone else?" I didn't answer right away. I was doing that internal calculation that happens in moments of shock, running through the options trying to find the one that made sense. I could ask for another provider. I could leave. I could pretend neither of us recognized the other and get through the appointment in silence. I said, "Do you want to get someone else?" She looked at me for a long moment. Then she pulled the rolling stool out from under the desk and sat down across from me, still in her white coat, and said, "Can I ask you something first?" I said yes. She said, "How are you doing?" Not medically, actually. Something in my throat tightened. I don't know why that question of all things cracked something open. Maybe because no one had asked me that in 4 days. Maybe because she was asking it across an impossible divide. She was his sister, and she was still asking it. I said, "I've had better weeks." She nodded slowly. She asked if I was safe. I said yes, same as I told Adrian. She said she needed to tell me that she was going to note the family connection in my file and flag that another provider was available if I preferred. She said that was standard practice and I had every right to make that choice. I asked her if she could still treat me if I chose to stay. She said yes. I said, "Then I'd like to stay." She was professional in a way that I think was harder for her than it looked. Thorough. Careful. She checked in with me at every step. When it was over, she sat back down on the stool and handed me a cup of water and said the aftercare instructions would be printed out at the front desk. Then she paused. She said, "I want you to know that whatever happens next, with my brother, I'm not going to pretend I didn't see you today." I looked at her. She said, "I've known something was wrong for a long time. I didn't know what. I want you to know that when you're ready to do whatever you need to do, I'll tell the truth about what I know." I asked her what she knew. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said she'd seen a text on her brother's phone 8 months ago. She hadn't been snooping. She'd been trying to find the name of a restaurant he'd recommended, and it had come up. The name in the text was Sienna's. The content was not ambiguous. She said she'd confronted him about it. He'd told her she'd misread the message. She'd said she hadn't. He'd said she was being dramatic. She'd said nothing else because she hadn't known what to say, hadn't known what I knew, hadn't known if he'd already told me, hadn't wanted to blow up a marriage that maybe, somehow, was working through something she didn't fully understand. She said, "I should have told you. I'm sorry I didn't. I didn't have an answer for that. I'm still not sure what the right answer is." She was in an impossible position. She made a choice I might have made too, but I was grateful she was telling me now. The next 3 months were the part that nobody warns you about, the part after the revelation, when the actual work begins. Adrian filed the petition in April. My husband was served at his office, which Adrian had recommended as the cleanest option. Neutral ground, witnesses present, no opportunity for a scene in our living room. I was told he stood in the lobby of his building for a long time after the process server left. He called me 14 times that day. I let them all go to voicemail. His attorney reached out to Adrian within 48 hours. The house was appraised and listed in May. We bought it for $740,000 in 2021, and in the current market it came in at just over $1 million. The equity split, combined with the investment accounts, meant I walked away with enough to make real choices. I put half in a high-yield savings account and the other half with a financial advisor my colleague had recommended, a woman named Sandra who explained every single thing she was doing and why, which was all I'd ever wanted from anyone handling my money. Sienna and I have not spoken. I don't anticipate we will. My mother cried when I told her. Not the messy kind. My mother is not a messy crier. The quiet kind, where she set down her coffee cup and pressed her lips together and said, "I'm so sorry, sweetheart," and then got up and hugged me for a long time without saying anything else. My dad didn't say much either. He drove to DC the following weekend and fixed the leaking faucet in my bathroom that my husband had been meaning to fix for 8 months. And when he was done, he sat at my kitchen table and had a beer, and we watched the Nationals game, and he didn't push me to talk about any of it. That was exactly right. Lydia texted me in June. She said she talked to her parents, that she'd told them what she knew and when she'd known it, that it had not been a smooth conversation, that she was sorry again, even though she'd already apologized and I'd already told her it was okay, or as okay as anything was. She said she hoped I was doing all right. She said if I ever wanted to have coffee. She meant it as a genuine offer and not as something she felt obligated to say. I thought about that text for 3 days. Then I wrote back, maybe in a few months. I think I need a little time first. She said, of course, I'll be here. I don't know what that relationship looks like going forward. I don't know if we'll be friends or just two people who share a complicated history and have coffee once a year and check in on each other in the vague way of people who have survived the same storm from different angles. But I think there's something there worth figuring out. She told the truth when it was hard. That counts for something. In my experience, that counts for quite a lot. The divorce was finalized in August. I had taken the day off, not to celebrate, not to mourn, just to be present for it. I sat in Adrian's office while she walked me through the final documents. I signed where she told me to sign. When it was done, she offered to take me to lunch, which I thought was unexpectedly human of her, and I said yes. We went to a Thai place 2 blocks from her office. I ordered the green curry. She ordered the pad see ew. We talked about her daughter's soccer league and the fact that DC summers are genuinely unreasonable and a book we'd both read and liked. Nothing about the case. Nothing about any of it. It was one of the nicest lunches I'd had in years. I'm in a different apartment now. It's smaller than the house. 1 bedroom, 2nd floor. A building in Capitol Hill with a bike lane out front. And a coffee shop on the corner that knows my order. I painted the bedroom walls a color called dried thyme, which is a gray-green that looks different in different light. Some mornings it looks like a forest. Some evenings it looks like the ocean. I am 31 years old. I have a job I'm good at, a savings account I understand, and a therapist I see every other Thursday. I have my parents, who I now call more often. I have colleagues who have quietly become friends. I do not have the life I thought I would have at this age, but I am starting to understand that the life I thought I would have was built on a version of things that wasn't real, a house with a beautiful kitchen I staged for other people. A marriage I was performing more than living. A friendship I'd been holding together by never asking the questions that needed to be asked. The thing about finding out the truth, even when it's devastating, is that it's still the truth. You can do something with the truth. You can build on it. You can make decisions that actually match the reality you're standing in. I think about Lydia sometimes, about the moment she walked into that procedure room and looked up from the chart and we recognized each other across the impossible geometry of that moment. She could have walked back out. She could have handed me off and pretended she'd never seen me. She could have gone home that night and called her brother and warned him. She didn't. She asked me how I was doing. Actually, I'm getting there, I think. Actually, I'm getting there, I think. Actually. People talk about betrayal like it's a single moment, like there's one specific second where everything breaks. But that's not how it actually works. Or at least that's not how it worked for me. The break had been happening slowly, quietly, in all the small ways I'd chosen not to look too hard at things. The late nights. The credit card charges in neighborhoods he had no reason to be in. The way Sienna had looked at me over brunch and said she was going through something she couldn't talk about yet. I had given her my hand across the table and said I was there for her, and she had let me. That's the part that took the longest to sit with. Not his choices. Hers. I've thought a lot about what I did right and what I did wrong in those first 48 hours after I saw that footage. The thing I'm most grateful for is that I didn't act on emotion before I had what I needed, not because I'm naturally calculating. But because something in me understood that the only way through was going to require me to be clear-headed at a moment when nothing in my life felt clear. So I made copies. I called a lawyer. I let myself feel everything later, in smaller pieces over a much longer stretch of time. That's not suppression. That's sequencing. There's a difference, and I think it matters. Lydia is the part of the story I keep returning to. She was in an impossible position, and she knew it. She'd known something for 8 months. And she'd made a choice I still don't fully know how to judge. But when the moment came, when she was sitting across from me in that procedure room with every reason in the world to protect herself, she asked me how I was doing. Actually. And then she told me the truth. What she did took a particular kind of courage that I think gets undervalued. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was just someone deciding that honesty mattered more than comfort, that doing the right thing was worth the cost of doing it. Her brother hasn't spoken to her since. I know that. I don't think she regrets it. The hardest thing I've had to understand, and I'm still understanding it, is that the life I was living wasn't a life that had been taken from me. It was one I had helped build on foundations I hadn't examined closely enough. I had trusted without verifying. I had assumed without asking. I had performed contentment for so long that I'd stopped checking whether the contentment was real. That's not self-blame. It's just honesty. And honesty, I've found, is the only place you can actually start rebuilding from. I'm 31. I live in an apartment I chose for myself, in a neighborhood that feels like mine. I have a therapist. I have parents who drive up to fix leaky faucets without making it mean anything more than love. I have, slowly, the beginnings of a life that matches the reality I'm actually standing in, rather than the one I thought I was supposed to want. I don't know what Sienna is doing now. I don't need to. What I know is this: the truth was always there. I just had to be ready to stop looking away from it. And the moment I stopped, the moment I actually looked, everything that needed to happen became very obvious, even when it was very hard. That's the only lesson I've got. But I think it's enough.